Welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin, and this is a custom video for Akias. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He has a question about pre-ceramic GMTs, specifically the Swiss-only dial GMTs. And if you don't know what those are, those came out in 98, 99, the end of the U serials, the start of the A serials. And if you look on the dial below the 6, it just says Swiss. Before that, they had the tritium statement T less than 25. And then after the Swiss-only dials, the latter part of the A's had the Swiss-made dials, and all Rolexes since then have had the Swiss-made dials. So it's only about a year or two that they made this anomalous dial. A lot of people think it's going to be collectible. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think they're really cool. All right, so here's a GMT pre-ceramic 16710 Swiss-only dial box papers. You can see the price is pretty high on this piece. Now, this is one of the most expensive stores in Japan, Quark, and we'll take a deep dive into some of the other pieces. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. But back to our regularly scheduled program. He writes, "Hi Austin, thanks for your videos and the time you put in them. I like your passion for watches. I wanted to consult with you about my intent to buy a Rolex GMT Master 2 1998 to 1999 Swiss-only dial, either a Pepsi or a Coke. Prices seem to be also high on this 20-plus-year-old GMT. What do you think about their current prices? Perhaps the ones without papers have more realistic prices. Do I have to care about papers? I just like the vintage aspect, the bezel size, and the pre-ceramic aspect of these models, and the fact that they are transition models with the Swiss-only dials. I hope to hear from you. Thanks, Akias." Let's use this intermission to appreciate a few discontinued OP39s. The less desirable blue dial, the more desirable white dial. The white dial really is a beautiful watch, very wearable in many situations. Those two on the right are the modern OP41s, and right here is a very special watch. It looks like an Explorer, but this is an OP with the very rare 369 dial. They only made this for a short while before thinking better of it because it looks a little too much like an Explorer. This was sold mostly in Japan, and its rarity is reflected in that price, which years from now could seem like a deal. Here's a 36mm modern OP with the silver dial, the nice warm hands and indices, not the most appreciated of the modern OPs. Here's a modern green dialed OP, not a fan of the shade of green, and for that reason, probably one of my least favorite modern OPs. A ladies OP. This concludes our intermission. Back to our regularly scheduled program. All right, I think that is a great GMT to target. If I was shopping for GMTs again these days, and I was willing to pay the money for those pre-ceramics, I'd be looking at the Swiss-only dials. Of course, they're going to come with the hollow inlink bracelet, but that's okay, all right? So what do I think of the prices? They're high. They're crazy high, and I've seen them go up year after year, and I don't think they're stopping. And if you're going to buy one as soon as possible. The best time to buy a pre-ceramic Rolex was yesterday, so just keep that in mind. Time is sort of the essence. No, you're not looking at a rare black dial 369 OP. You're looking at the Explorer, and here are a few Explorers. You can check out the prices. On the whole, I'm glad they reverted back from 39mm to 36mm, although I really think they should have split the difference with something like a 37 or 38. And that's, of course, assuming that the prices on pre-ceramics are going to continue to rise. I think they will. The prices on the retail pieces have gone up just yesterday, and so I think that's going to affect the pre-owned pre-ceramic market as well. And I don't see any slowdown there, and the GMT is a really hot model when it comes to the pre-ceramics. I'd say even more so than the no-date sub or the sub, or pretty much any other Rolex watch, save for the Daytonas. Now, a more affordable option could be a 40mm Explorer 2, the 16570, like you're looking at here. This is a tritium dialed one, but you could find a Swiss-only dial, and it would be quite a bit cheaper. You're going to get that GMT function. It's going to have a different aesthetic, but it's a lot like the 16570. Now these are the later 42 millimeter versions, and the aesthetic is quite different. All these have black dials. Place your bets as to the premium on the white dials. We'll see at the next intermission. All right, so your question, do you have to care about the papers? That's a personal choice, and it goes into the buying philosophy. And let me tell you about my buying philosophy, and then I'll answer your question. All right, so I've always been sort of the bargain basement shopper. I've always gone for sort of the cheapest pieces. And if you can think of pieces as having like a price range here, the really expensive box and papers, maybe new old stock pieces would be right here. And this would be, you know, the cheaper pieces, probably no box, no papers. Well, I like to go for these pieces, okay? I like to go for these pieces because as this rises, it takes a short time before you can see that you're in the green and that what you paid for your watch, you could get out of it for, all right? And I often have this habit of saying, well, you know, I'm just going to wear this watch, so I really want to get the cheapest piece. Now, what usually happens, admittedly, is I'll have an RSC service. I'll get the service papers. I'll source a box, and all of a sudden it starts to feel like kind of like a collector's piece, and I start treating it like a collector's piece. And whether it is or not, that's debatable. You know, I think all Rolex watches are collectible, whether they have box and papers or not. But papers and box really define a collector's piece. And so if that's what you're going for, I would go for the box and papers. Going back to my own buying philosophy, what happens to me is I see prices rise, and then I think about the extra money I could have paid for the papers. And I always, after the fact, wish I had done that, especially when, you know, you see a piece maybe you paid $4,000 for, like my Explorer 2, and if I'd paid just 5 or 6, I could have papers and I'd be in the clear, right? Meaning it would be totally justifiable because I could totally get my money back. Now, I can totally get my money back for the 4 I put into that watch, but still, it would make it feel complete and collectible. And so take my regret as a lesson and think about splashing out for the box and the papers. Because I think in a couple of years, assuming the prices rise, you're gonna really appreciate that you did that. All right, so here are the black ones, here are the white ones, and on the whole, more or less, it's about $1,000 difference. Now, you can switch out the dials. At least I know you can on the 40 millimeter version, the 16570, but I can imagine you can do it on the 42 millimeter version. That'll cost about $1,000. Now, the flip side of that is if you get a minty piece, box and papers, it might affect the wearing experience, all right? And that can alter how much fun you have with your watch. One of the most pleasurable Rolex watches that I have is the Explorer 2 because, you know, it had a third-party polish, no box, no papers. Actually, it did have a box. Now it's got service papers, but I never really looked at it like a collectible piece because compared to the other Rolex watches that I have, the Explorer 2 isn't as desirable. And again, that third-party polish, the lack of papers. And so it's a comfortable watch to wear. You know, I made a video about this. Get the worst piece you can because it just makes it so wearable. And I kind of stand by that, but at the same time, I don't have to tell you how good it is to have a complete set and papers as well. Keep in mind though, that you have to keep up with that stuff. You have to keep up with the box. You have to keep up with the papers. And that's a pain. And it's sort of like, you know, if you just get the piece only, you get to throw it on your wrist and just enjoy it. And there's something to be said for that. I mean, if you're going to be a one-watch guy and you're not playing this collector's game and all that, you know, you find a cheap piece, wearable, you buy it, you throw it on your wrist. You don't have to keep up with papers, box, or anything like that. So there's something to be said for that. But, you know, you're watching watch channels, so there's a little bit of collector in you. Go ahead and go for the papers. We'll take a moment during this final intermission to appreciate the Milgauss with his GV glass. Go on, try to copy it. Rolex dares you. They believe it's so impossible you can't do it. Here's a blue-dialed Sky Dweller, probably the most sought-after Sky Dweller period, and this gray market price reflects that. We'll end on an Air King, a model that I think is going to see a change in 2022. Be sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. All right, so I want to end it on this point, and I think this is going to seal the deal as to why you want papers. Now, the older the watch, the more important it is that it has papers, all right? The more value it brings to the piece, because papers get lost, they get thrown away. So the older the piece, the greater the chance that it's not going to have papers. And so that's why really old pieces that still have the papers bring so much value. I mean, I just bring to mind a piece that's only, well, less than 20 years old, and it was the Fat 4 Kermit we saw in a video recently, and it didn't have the papers, and it was going for around the same price as the non-Fat 4 with the papers, right? Now, if that Fat 4 Kermit had the papers, it would have been probably $35,000, $40,000, all right? So papers really mean something. Now, when it comes to the 6-digit pieces, the ceramic pieces, it's kind of weird when they don't have papers, or cards, I guess we should call them. It's like, it's a 2021 piece. What happened to the card? That's kind of weird. Those seem fishy to me, and I don't know that I would buy a really modern piece without the card. But when it comes to the 20-year-old pieces, you know, maybe half of them have papers. I'm not really sure the ratio. But again, the further back you go, the more rare it is to have papers. And with each year, people are losing their papers, they're getting misplaced. Wives are throwing out their husbands' 16710 papers. And for that reason, papers are going to see the price of your watch and the value of your watch increase exponentially. So I think if you have a non-papers piece, this is how the price rise goes. Kind of like this. Linearly, sort of diagonal, straight up. All right, that's great, that's what we want. But when it comes to pieces with papers, I think the value rise looks more like this. It kind of curves up. And when you're talking a real old piece, you know, you have this real steep incline of value. I mean, think about, you know, what papers meant to a 1675 30 years ago. All right, you know, it would be here, but now it just, you know, it really is making them grow exponentially. And your watch eventually is going to be 40 years old. So get the papers now. They will pay dividends in the future. You just have to keep up with them. And they might make your watch feel a little bit less wearable. But go ahead and learn from my experience and just pay a little bit more for those papers, which in 2022 is kind of a lot more, but I think it'll be worth it. All right, guys, let him know what you think. Should he pull a Austin Daniels and cheap out and go for bottom of the barrel, or should he put down a little bit more for the box and papers? Hey, you guys know what I would do. Box and papers, but it ain't my money, right? All right, guys, let him know what you would do. Thanks for watching. Take care. Thank you, Akias, for your custom video request. If you guys are interested in a custom video, take a look down at the description of this video. You can see how you can make it happen. Akias, let me know what you do, all right? Send me an email when you pull the trigger, all right? I'd like a little bit of follow-up. Good luck. Take care. I'll see you guys next time.